Hey guys, tonight we drift through scorching deserts, glittering palaces, and markets that smell like frankincense and roasted goat. You're about to join the richest man who ever lived. Yes, richer than Bezos and Birkenstocks, as he packs up half a continent's worth of treasure and walks all the way to Mecca. Picture this. Gold dust trailing behind you, scholars chanting ancient verses, camels loaded with velvet cushions and sugar-dried figs, and you, ruler of Mali, wearing enough bling to blind a diplomat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far-flung and dreamy, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where bedtime finds you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in Niani, capital of the Mali Empire, sometime in the early 1300s. The air is thick with the scent of shea oil and smoke from breakfast fires. Somewhere outside, griots are already warming up their chorus strings, ready to sing your name. And what a name it is, Musa, Lord of the Mines of Wangera, King of Kings of the Mali Empire, and likely the wealthiest human being in all of human history. But what you're doing today isn't about money, not directly. Today, you rise not just as a king, but as a pilgrim. You're about to begin the Hajj, the sacred Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca. It's not a casual affair. This isn't like hopping on a red-eye with a suitcase and a neck pillow. You're taking thousands of people with you, enough camels to block a city street, and so much gold that future generations will assume you were a mythical creature instead of a real man with sore feet and big dreams. Your empire stretches farther than the eye can follow. From the lush savannas of present-day Mali to the gold-rich forests of Ghana, you rule over a kingdom where wealth pours like honey. Gold, salt, ivory, cola nuts, it's all under your feet. Your people mine it, your merchants trade it, and you're about to give a lot of it away. The decision to embark on pilgrimage came months ago, likely after consulting your imams and advisors. Islam is woven into your empire's governance and culture, but Mecca, that's the heart of it all. You want to see the Kaaba with your own eyes, feel the marble under your sandals, and stand shoulder to shoulder with Muslims from across the world. There's just one small logistical problem: the distance. Over 3,000 miles of dust, mountain, and desert. But you're not going alone. Oh no. Your preparations begin with the royal scribes. They note down every village you'll pass, every oasis you'll camp at, and every market that might appreciate a good story and a little gold. Historians still argue whether your planning was months in the making or if you simply snapped your fingers one day and yelled, "Caravan!" Either way, it gets real fast. You assemble an entourage that would make a music festival look modest. At its peak, the caravan will include 60,000 people, slaves, soldiers, cooks, imams, architects, translators, and a fleet of griots to keep everyone in rhythm. And the camels? Hundreds of them, maybe more, each loaded with packs of pure gold bars, gold dust, and elaborately embroidered tents that flutter in the Saharan breeze like silk kites. You personally command 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4-pound gold staffs. Some have umbrellas, just to keep your royal head shaded. You also insist on clean water wherever you camp, which means portable water bearers jog ahead of you daily, with goatskin bladders sloshing in the sun. The fringe detail. You even pack entertainers. Jugglers, storytellers, and acrobats travel with you. Because apparently, the journey to Mecca isn't worth doing unless someone's doing flips at the campfire. And so, the city of Niani buzzes with anticipation. Merchants line up with rare spices to sell you. Mothers hoist children onto their shoulders to catch a glimpse of your gleaming procession. And some poor palace servant is desperately trying to untangle a gold-threaded carpet from a donkey's legs. Then the drums start, slow at first, then rising in rhythm like thunder over the savannah. The griots begin to sing, your lineage, your glory, your wisdom, and, let's be honest, your seriously massive wallet. You mount your horse, robes shimmering under the African sun. Cheers erupt. You raise a hand, not just as a farewell, but as a signal. And just like that, the great pilgrimage begins. The air is alive with dust and possibility. You ride at the front, eyes fixed east, imagining Mecca's distant spires, even as termite mounds and baobab trees pass by. You're a king, yes, but also a seeker now. 1 part humility, 2 part spectacle. A few days in, reality starts to set in. The trail is dry. Camels complain. People get lost. A few griots argue over what rhymes with glory. Already, the romanticism of the journey is fading under the weight of sweaty leather saddles and blistered feet. But you don't waver. Every morning, you rise with the sun, greet your caravan, and pray facing east. Because the goal is bigger than gold, bigger than pride. It's about your soul, or at least, that's what you tell the griots. They nod, scribbling your words into the poems of tomorrow. You're not just traveling across the Sahara, you're dragging civilization with you. Every morning, your caravan heaves itself off the earth like a waking beast. Tens of thousands of feet stirring up the dry red dust, camels grumbling like hungover accordion players, and servants tightening the loads of food, tents, and treasure. The line of travelers stretches so far across the savannah that you can't see the end, even from the saddle. You've heard other kings, did the Hajj quietly. Not you. That wouldn't be you. The word subtle is as foreign to your journey as snow. So your caravan is a walking empire, a mobile fortress of culture, status, and above all gold. Each camel wears embroidered harnesses. Some wear bells that jingle gently with each step, a kind of sleepy percussion for your endless march. Your personal guard marches with iron-tipped spears and shields made from hippo hide. Decorative, sure, but also a little intimidating in case someone gets clever near the coin pouches. You've got tailors, too, just in case anyone tears their silk robes, or if a camel wants a fashion refresh. You're not joking. One of your camels is draped in indigo dyed cloth, trimmed with imported brass beads. He's your favorite, obviously. The main feature of this parade, though, is the gold. So much gold. You've got chests of it. You've got bags of gold dust that children roll in like it's beach sand. You even throw coins into crowds like some medieval opera. You get a dinar. You get a dinar. Historians estimate you brought at least 18 tons of gold with you. That's the weight of about 9 cars. But instead of sitting in a vault, it's bouncing along in camel packs and slave satchels, glinting in the sun like the gods themselves approved your spending habits. Here's a fringe fact you don't share with your advisors. You're not totally sure how much gold you're supposed to bring on a pilgrimage. Islam encourages charity, sure, but there's no exact ruling on caravan the size of a small city and hand out treasure like parade candy. Still, generosity is a virtue, right? As the days pass, the size of your entourage attracts curious wanderers. Merchants tag along, hoping to trade goods or impress your court with fine silks and strange fruits. Local rulers send envoys to greet you, or more realistically, to gawk at your wealth and maybe ask for a small donation, maybe a golden tea tray, maybe 6 camels, depends on the day. And there's music. Oh, the music. Your griots sing as you ride, weaving your deeds into myth before you've even reached Mecca. They call you Lion of Mali, Lord of the Rivers, and less poetically, that guy with all the gold. You don't mind. You kind of are that guy. One day, as you cross a scrubby plain outside the Niger River basin, a dust storm kicks up. Visibility drops. Camels panic. Tents collapse. One of your imams tries to chant over the howling wind, but the only thing louder than his prayers is a particularly rude goat screaming in confusion. You wait it out in your travel pavilion, a tent large enough to house a wedding reception. Inside, cushions are piled knee-high. You sip sour milk and eat dried dates from a golden dish shaped like a crocodile, a gift from some chieftain. You try to look wise, but honestly, you're mostly trying to keep sand out of your mouth. After the storm passes, the damage is light. A few startled servants, a couple of missing camels, and one very irritated griot who claims a donkey stepped on his loot. You tell him to write a ballad about it. Still, even with the setbacks, your caravan moves forward with eerie precision, like a slow-moving river of silk, bronze, and shimmering yellow metal. It rolls over hills, winds past baobab trees, and flows through bustling villages where children rush out to stare at the man who looks like he might be God. One evening, as the stars blink into the sky, you camp near a riverbank. Someone roasts goat over an open fire, the meat crackling and fragrant. The griots are quiet for once, and the rhythmic sounds of the camp settling, tent ropes creaking, bowls clinking, tired laughter rising like smoke, fill the warm air. You sit by yourself, watching the river. It flows east, like you. And you think, for a moment, just a flicker, about whether you're doing this all for God or for glory. Historians still argue whether your pilgrimage was purely spiritual or largely political. Some claim it was to display Mali's power on an international scale. Others insist it was a sincere act of faith. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's the secret. Before you turn in, a messenger brings news from a scout ahead. You're nearing the Sahara proper now, the point where scrubland gives way to sand. Endless, blinding sand. The kind that swallows caravans and coughs them out decades later as bones and mirages. It doesn't scare you. It should. But you've got 60,000 reasons to feel confident. Also, plenty of water. Also, several crates of perfumes, because body odor is not royal. Tomorrow begins the true test. You'll cross the largest hot desert on Earth, and you'll do it with style. The Sahara greets you like an oven door flung open too fast, an endless expanse of shimmering heat, wind-blasted dunes, and sand that gets absolutely everywhere. Between your toes, in your food, inside your scrolls. One of your scholars swears his beard is now 40% silica. You believe him. Crossing the Sahara is like walking across the moon, if the moon were made of hot paprika and actively trying to kill you. Still, you press forward, the mighty line of your caravan carving slow grooves into the golden earth. Some travelers say the desert is empty, but that's a lie. It's full of things that don't care if you live or die. You pass through ancient trans-Saharan trade routes, where the wind howls like it remembers every traveler who never made it. The camels groan under their loads, and their wide, padded feet plod over the sand like fuzzy boats. Your soldiers march behind them in sweat-streaked armor, constantly brushing away flies with fronds of woven grass. And then there's you, wrapped in white and gold robes, seated high on a camel whose saddle is more ornate than most people's homes. You try to maintain your regal composure, but frankly, riding a camel is like balancing on a moody recliner stapled to a trampoline. Some nights, when the air cools just enough to breathe again, you set up camp in places that don't appear on maps. Your tent, larger than some inns, is lined with dyed leather and glowing lanterns. Outside, the servants cook millet porridge with dried okra and smoked fish, while griots strum lullabies under a canopy of stars. A fringe tidbit. One of your cooks insists on seasoning every dish with ground tamarind bark for good luck. You suspect it's just to cover up the taste of slightly spoiled camel milk. Still, no one argues. Not here. The Tuareg nomads, lords of the desert, appear as silent silhouettes along the ridgelines, faces wrapped in indigo turbans, eyes wary. You invite their leaders to your fire, offering salt bricks, dates, and a pouch of gold dust. They accept with solemn nods. Trade is their language, and you speak it fluently. Salt for gold, information for safety, and just a little ceremony to make everyone feel important. Despite the formalities, you know the dangers. The Sahara is notorious for ambushes, dehydration, and the occasional surprise sandstorm that can erase an entire camp overnight. You double your scouts. One camel gets spooked by a sudden dune collapse and bolts off with half a tent. It's eventually recovered, minus the tent, plus an inexplicable rooster tied to its saddle. Each morning is the same ritual. Wake before the sun. Sip scalding tea. Hold prayer beneath a sky that starts black, then fades to soft pink. Then march slow, rhythmic, relentless. The desert becomes your clock, your map, your enemy, and your stage. You cross the Tainsraft, one of the most feared stretches of the Sahara. It's known locally as the land of thirst. No wells, no trees, just sand, heat, and the occasional bone. Your water bearers, heroes in plain goatskin, work tirelessly, dashing between travelers to offer ladles of lukewarm salvation. You reward them with silver bangles and grateful glances. Despite your careful planning, the journey wears people down. Some of the older pilgrims start to falter. You order hammocks strung between camels for them. Others grow restless, especially the young griots, who miss city life and flat surfaces. One of them writes a poem comparing the Sahara to an angry grandmother's rice pudding. It becomes weirdly popular among the caravan's younger crowd. But it's not all misery and mirages. The desert brings strange beauty, too. You spot ghostly mirages that shimmer on the horizon, castles made of light, rivers that ripple and vanish. One evening, a caravan rider swears he saw a woman made of fire dancing across a dune. You don't ask questions. You just pass around more tea. The biggest surprise comes near a forgotten desert outpost. There, among sun-bleached rocks, you discover an ancient burial mound. Your scholars get excited, possibly Berber, maybe Garamantian. Historians still argue whether these desert tombs were royal graves or simply well-placed mirage traps. You offer a prayer and a few coins. It's good to respect the old bones. There's also trade, always trade. Even in the emptiest places, someone's waiting with a camel and something to sell. One man offers incense from the Horn of Africa, wrapped in palm leaves and smelling like spicy rain. Another presents a pet monkey dressed in a turban. You decline, politely. You already have enough animals in your caravan, thinking they're royalty. And slowly, painfully slowly, you inch closer to the northern rim of the Sahara. The landscape begins to change. Scrubby brush reappears. The sun still bakes everything into submission, but the air smells faintly of civilization again. You pass rock carvings older than language, and the sand gives way to hardened soil. You're nearing the legendary city of Cairo now. But for all your majesty, the Sahara has left its mark. Your robes are stained, your camels leaner, your men quieter. You've lost things along the way, not just supplies, but certainty, and maybe a little pride. That's the desert's tax. Still, you survived. And better yet, your caravan survived. Mostly intact. A few griots are sunburned into different personalities. And a camel named Bakery now believes he's part of your royal council. You allow it. Frankly, he makes better decisions than one of your cousins back in Niani. Ahead lies Egypt, the bustling, gold-hungry jewel of the Nile. And you're about to walk into it like a sand-dusted thunderclap. The desert gives way, at long last, to the slow shimmer of the Nile Valley, a ribbon of life winding through sand-colored cities and palm-dotted fields. You can smell water on the wind before you even see it. It smells like mud and mint and miracle. After weeks of dry lips and camel sweat, the breeze feels like a hymn. When your caravan finally stumbles into the outskirts of the Egyptian frontier, it's as though the entire region collectively blinks and says, "What is that?" You are not subtle. You arrive with thousands of followers, your own mobile village, and enough gold to tip the economic scales of a city, and possibly a continent. The streets fill with people climbing walls and waving from windows, trying to catch a glimpse of the king of Mali. Even the pigeons seem to pause mid-flight to stare. You settle your people in the nearby oases, sprawling fields with date palms, so thick they hum with bees. The camels collapse into the sand with groans of profound camel exhaustion. You reward them with extra rations of water, and in one case, a strange beetroot jelly the cooks claim is good for morale. It's here, at the mouth of civilization, that your caravan takes a moment to regroup. Tents go up. Musicians play low songs. The griots swap desert horror stories that grow increasingly exaggerated. One claims to have fought off a sand demon, using only a sandal and an insult. No one challenges him. He's holding the sandal. You use this pause to send envoys ahead to Cairo, to announce your arrival. Because, again, subtlety is not your vibe. Cairo's Mamluk Sultan, Al-Nasir Muhammad, is already aware of you. Rumors of your wealth and your pilgrimage have raced ahead like wildfire on dry parchment. What happens next, though, is something historians still squint at. See, tradition dictates that when you arrive in a sovereign Muslim country, you pay respects to the ruler. But you politely refuse an immediate audience. Why? Some say it's because the Sultan sent a messenger instead of coming himself. Others say it's because you felt it improper to bow to another earthly king. And still others believe you were just very tired and needed a nap. Whatever the reason, the message is clear. Musa doesn't rush. Even for Cairo. When you do enter the city, it's nothing short of theater. Cairo at this time is one of the greatest cities in the world, rich in scholars, architecture, spices, and political gossip. But for a few dizzying days, you are the main event. Picture it. You glide through the streets like a comet trailing velvet and gold dust. Your guards wear matching turbans. Your horses prance in formation. Even your dogs have gold collars. Crowds press in, chanting praises and begging for coins. You throw handfuls of gold dust into the crowd, like it's birdseed. Cheers erupt. A donkey nearby faints, possibly from the drama. You check into one of the finest madrasas in the city, turning it into a de facto Malian embassy. Your cooks set up makeshift kitchens, roasting lamb rubbed with spices from your homeland. Egyptian neighbors gather around, asking for recipes. One cook starts charging a few coins for secret spice blends. You approve. Entrepreneurial spirit. Then the shopping begins. You buy gifts for scholars. You donate generously to mosques. You fund the construction of a school. You even purchase rare books with bindings so delicate that your scribes have to carry them like baby birds. One story claims you tried to purchase an entire neighborhood and turn it into a garden. Another says you bought a giraffe. That last one might be fiction, but with you, it's hard to tell. Here's the twist. Your spending is so generous, so relentless, so wildly abundant, that you accidentally trigger a regional economic crisis. Yes, really. Gold, which was once precious and carefully controlled, becomes suddenly too available. The value drops. Inflation soars. Prices go haywire. Local merchants raise their eyebrows so hard they practically levitate. Historians estimate it took a decade for the Egyptian economy to recover. Your wealth quite literally broke the market. But you're just trying to be nice. You're giving charity. You're building goodwill. You're making it rain gold. Still, even in this golden chaos, you don't forget your spiritual purpose. You attend the Friday prayer at Al-Azhar Mosque, standing beside Cairo's most revered imams. You listen to sermons. You debate scripture. You fund the restoration of a crumbling minaret with a bag of coins tossed casually at the foot of the stairs. In the quiet of evening, you meet with scholars in perfumed gardens, sipping sweet tea and asking questions about divine justice, the nature of paradise, and whether dogs go to heaven. One scholar says no. You stare at your gold-collared dog for a long moment. The scholar quietly changes his answer. You also begin selecting scholars to accompany you back home. Mali needs knowledge, mathematicians, architects, poets, and theologians who can help turn your empire into a cultural beacon. You promise them gold, land, and warm weather. One agrees instantly. Another asks if Mali has any good coffee. You tell him you'll invent it if necessary. As your stay in Cairo winds down, people are still talking. Some admire you. Some are baffled. A few are furious about the price of bread. But all agree. No one has ever visited Egypt like this before. You leave behind a trail of gold coins, a lot of confusion, and one very overworked accountant who keeps muttering something about dinar deflation. As your caravan reassembles, the sun rises over the Nile, casting long shadows that stretch all the way toward Mecca. You don't sneak out of Cairo. You depart, and that departure is as much a performance as your entrance. The city's still reeling from your generosity. Shopkeepers can't decide whether to bless your name or quietly curse your coin, but the crowd gathers anyway to watch you go. Your camels are cleaner, your robes brighter, and your caravan slightly larger than when you arrived. A few Cairo locals have decided to join you, servants, curious scholars, and at least one wide-eyed teenager who insists he's just here to see what the desert feels like. You give him a hat. He's going to need it. The Nile watches you leave, its waters glittering gold as though it, too, was dipped in your coin. And with that, you begin the final leg of your eastward pilgrimage, the journey to Mecca. The air changes as you move out of Egypt. The landscape tilts, sand becomes hills, dry valleys start to curl into coastal mountains. The sky is somehow both wider and softer here, the wind carrying not just dust, but stories from the Red Sea ports, tales of Indian merchants, Sufi mystics, and one very loud parrot that preaches against gambling in 3 languages. Now, though, the showy excess begins to fall away. Not all at once. You still have your gold. You still travel like a king. But there's a shift in you. Cairo changed something. Maybe the way people looked at you. Awed, but also skeptical. Maybe the quiet power of that city's ancient rhythm. Or maybe it's just that you're tired of being a parade float. You start giving more orders to pare down. Less silver in the tents. No more juggling at breakfast. You even tell the camel with the jeweled tassels he's going to need to tone it down. He ignores you. Camels have no shame. As you pass through towns like Qusair and into the Arabian Peninsula, the pilgrimage becomes more solemn. The road narrows. The number of travelers increases. Pilgrims from across the Islamic world join the route. Berbers, Persians, Sudanese, Yemenis, even a group of Central Asian merchants carrying carpets the size of ship sails. You're no longer the only marvel on the trail. This is something you didn't expect. To feel small. The Hajj isn't just a personal journey. It's the journey. You begin to see yourself not as a king, but as one thread in a vast, woven cloth stretching across centuries and continents. One night, huddled by a smoky campfire beneath unfamiliar stars, a fellow pilgrim from Syria offers you dates and says, without recognizing you, "May Allah accept your journey." You thank him, and don't mention your kingdom, or your gold, or your camel with the attitude. Some of your advisors notice the change. They stop pushing so hard for public appearances. The griots begin composing quieter verses, less about your wealth, more about your footsteps. Even your royal tent starts to feel more like a mosque than a throne room. You stop to pray more often. You fast more strictly. One day, you help an old man repack his mule's fallen load. No ceremony, no audience, just you, sweating beside a stranger, smiling. Still, you don't lose your flair entirely. At a Red Sea port near Jeddah, you trade 3 ounces of gold for a rare black pearl said to have belonged to an Abbasid caliph. It's beautiful, but you don't keep it. You gift it to a boy who guided your group to fresh water. His eyes go wide. His mother bursts into tears. One of your advisors quietly mutters something about uncontrolled distribution, but you ignore him. The sea lies close now. You can smell it in the air. Salt, tar, fish, and prayer. The Red Sea crossing is short, but sacred. You take a boat crewed by sun-wrinkled sailors who laugh at the idea of kings. You want to get across? Then sit down and don't rock the boat. You obey. The waves rock you into a kind of meditation. Your body aches from weeks of travel, but your mind feels strangely light. Maybe it's the salt air. Maybe it's the nearness of your goal. Or maybe it's just the silence. No more drums. No more poets yelling over campfires. Just the creak of wood and the whisper of the sea. You arrive in Arabia, and suddenly everything feels different. The sand is finer. The hills roll with quiet grace. And everywhere, is the murmur of Arabic prayers carried on the wind. The caravan reforms once more. Tighter. Smaller. Not because you've lost people, but because the journey has peeled away the excess. It's just you now. You and your purpose. And a few camels who still think they're nobility. You ride closer to Mecca with every hour, watching the crowd swell. People walk barefoot. Some cry. Others sing. All are focused on one goal, reaching the sacred heart of Islam. And you, Musa, the richest man on earth, feel suddenly, gloriously poor. Mecca rises before you like a dream seen through desert heat. Sun-bleached buildings clinging to rocky slopes, narrow streets threaded with pilgrims, and above it all, the sacred sanctuary, the Masjid al-Haram, the great mosque, cradling the Kaaba at its heart like a black stone heart beating through centuries. You've imagined this moment so many times, in the halls of your palace back in Niani, under the whispering palms beside the Niger, even in the blistering quiet of the Sahara, when sand was all you could see and your gold felt pointless. But now, here you are, draped in simple Ihram robes, barefoot, your head bare to the sun. Not a king, not a conqueror, just one more soul among thousands, whispering praise beneath a sky that feels like it's listening. There's no procession, no trumpets, no feathered camels. You enter Mecca not with thunder, but with silence. You perform the rites of the tawaf, circling the Kaaba 7 times. You press your palm against its cool stone, feeling the weight of centuries beneath your fingertips. You say the same prayers as everyone else. And for once, no one points. No one asks for gold. You are utterly, beautifully anonymous. This, you realize, is the point. The Kaaba itself is striking in its simplicity. Draped in its black cloth, it looks ancient and unknowable. Some say it dates back to Adam. Others believe Abraham and Ishmael built it. Historians still argue whether its earliest structure was made of stone, wood, or divine instruction. But you don't care. It's not about what it's made of. It's about what it holds. Unity, direction, surrender. Your caravan sets up camp outside the city. Most of your people are weeping with joy or mumbling prayers in a dozen languages. There are Mande dialects, Wolof chants, Arabic psalms, and even one very off-key grout trying to hum quietly, so as not to disrupt the sanctity of the moment. You forgive him. He means well. You spend several days in Mecca, completing each ritual with care. The Sa'i, the symbolic run between Safa and Marwa, reminds you of your mother's stories, the ones that blurred Quranic tradition with local legend, where mothers became rivers and prayers turned to birds. You whisper her name as you run. You don't trip, but your heart nearly does. Then comes the standing at Arafat, a sea of white robes under an aching sky. Here, the boundaries blur completely. Rich and poor, sultan and shepherd, you're all just specks in the same desert, facing the same wind, pleading for the same mercy. The heat is brutal, and the silence even more so. It's like the entire world holds its breath. You find yourself crying, and not for any one reason, just because. Afterward, the pilgrimage begins to unwind. You sacrifice an animal, one of your camels, who has grown particularly lazy, but also oddly fond of you. You thank him first. Your men give the meat to the poor. You sleep that night beneath a sky you now see with different eyes. No longer the roof over your kingdom, but the ceiling of a house you share with every other believer. But not everything is spiritual. There's also the politics. Even here, other rulers seek you out. Whispers travel fast, and even in Mecca, your gold glimmers like a beacon. The Sultan of Delhi sends a messenger to offer rare silk and ask about trade routes. A Yemeni prince proposes a partnership. He has spices, you have gold, and between you, perhaps a fleet. You nod, smile politely, and make no promises, because you're thinking bigger now. You begin sketching out an idea, quietly, by candlelight. A grand university in Mali, a center of Islamic learning that rivals anything in Cairo or Fez. You want imams fluent in astronomy. You want poets who can rhyme in 4 languages. You want your empire to become not just a stop on a trade route, but a destination. This idea grows with each prayer, with each page of scripture, with each voice that echoes through Mecca's narrow streets and calls out to God. And that's the irony, isn't it? You left Mali trying to reach God. You brought camels, dancers, acrobats, mountains of gold. But here in Mecca, all you need is dust beneath your feet and the echo of your own breath. One afternoon, sitting beside the Zamzam well, a scholar from Damascus asks you a question. Not about your wealth, not about your journey. He simply says, "What will you take back?" You smile, not because you know the answer, but because you know that the answer matters. You've completed the rites. You've stood in silence at Arafat, walked between Safa and Marwa, thrown your stones at the pillars in Mina, and offered your sacrifice. The Hajj is done, but your journey, not even close. You've left behind a version of yourself in Mecca, one lighter, more grounded, with fewer jewels, but more resolve. Now it's time to return, but you won't go back empty-handed. You've got plans, and as it turns out, a growing entourage of human resources. You begin hand-selecting scholars, artisans, poets, and architects like someone building a civilization from scratch. One by one, you make your pitch, polished, persuasive, usually involving gold. Come to Mali, you say. There's honor, respect, a university to build, a future to shape. Some say yes immediately. Others hesitate, unsure of the distant land across the desert. But gold talks. So does vision. And when you describe Timbuktu, still more rumor than reality, as a rising star of Islamic learning, people begin to believe. You're not just building a capital, you're drafting a legend. A poet from Damascus agrees to come after you quote one of his verses from memory. An architect from Cairo joins when you offer him a blank check and a challenge. Make something that will still be standing when the sand forgets my name. He accepts, eyes already sketching shapes in the air. Even more intriguing is the jurist you convinced to join. A scholar of fiqh, Islamic law, he's notorious for his strict interpretations and thunderous sermons. You want him not because he's agreeable, but because he's respected. You're building credibility, not just beauty. Faith must be as solid as stone. You also pick up books, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Legal texts, astronomy guides, poetry anthologies, Qurans illuminated in blue and gold. You commission custom translations. Your scribes beg for sleep. You don't grant it, but it's not all academics and diplomacy. There's still the oddities. One day at a Red Sea port, you stumble across a storyteller claiming to have mapped the winds. Literally, he sells small scrolls with spirals and symbols that look suspiciously like someone spilled lentil soup on a compass. You buy 3, just in case. Another time, you're approached by a merchant offering a strange metal that glows like fire but stays cold. You suspect it's just polished copper. You buy it anyway. Fringe knowledge, after all, is still knowledge. And of course, there are the people you don't recruit. One alchemist offers you immortality for the right price. You decline, though not before asking for his business card. He doesn't have one. You're not surprised. Every new person you add to your return caravan makes it stranger, richer, louder. You've now got an architect who only communicates through diagrams, a musician who insists his lute can summon rain. Spoiler, it can't. And a stargazer who sleeps in a hammock tied between camels. This is your team. This is your Mali in the making. Your departure from Mecca is quieter than your arrival. You leave after morning prayer, veiled in the blue light of dawn. No procession, no fanfare, just a slow movement of hooves and wheels and hushed goodbyes. You take one last look at the Kaaba. You don't wave. You just bow your head. As your caravan moves northwest, the realization sets in. You've changed. The pilgrimage has burned something away and left you lighter. But now you're filling that space with purpose, with design. You're not just returning home. You're bringing the world with you. One evening, somewhere in the Hijaz Mountains, you sit with your new architect by the fire. He draws ideas in the dirt, arches, domes, minarets so high they kiss the stars. You nod, then start drawing beside him, surprising even yourself. It's the mosque you want for Timbuktu. Wide open, full of light, a place for thinking, for praying, for arguing about things worth arguing about. Later, the jurist joins you, shaking his head at your lopsided dome sketch. This will never stand, he says, but the intention stands. He offers corrections. You pretend to disagree, then quietly instruct the architect to follow the jurist's advice. The conversations turn from theology to governance, from sand to stone. You start mapping where to put libraries, who will teach jurisprudence, what the mosque schedule should be. You're planning an empire not just of wealth, but of thought. Historians still argue whether this was your plan all along, whether you went to Mecca to return with a brain trust disguised as a pilgrimage. Some say yes. Others think you were just struck by inspiration halfway through. One scholar wrote, Musa left as a pilgrim and returned as a blueprint. That's your favorite. You don't even mind the mixed metaphor. Back on the trail, your caravan now feels less like a parade and more like a mobile think tank. The griots still sing, but their songs have grown more philosophical. One composes a verse comparing the Quran to a compass and you to a man finally following it. The desert is ahead again, but this time you're not afraid of it, because this time you're not just walking home. You're walking toward the Mali Empire, reimagined. The second crossing of the Sahara feels different, less like a test, more like a return. You know its moods now. You know which dunes whisper lies, which trails disappear by morning, and which mirages are just heat-drunken ghosts. You've walked this ocean of sand before, and now you're sailing it with purpose. But make no mistake, the desert still doesn't care who you are. Musa, richest man alive, king of kings, architect of the future? The Sahara shrugs and says, bring water. The sun's just as brutal, the night's just as cold. Your camels still moan like they've been betrayed by fate. But you're better prepared this time. Your caravan is tighter, leaner. The fools and freeloaders were quietly left behind. What remains is a fleet of pilgrims, thinkers, builders, and one camel who still insists on walking in front, despite having no idea where he's going. You pass the old way stations again, those silent mud brick outposts half swallowed by sand. At one, a Tuareg merchant recognizes you and gasps. You're back, he says, half as a question, half as a dare. You know it, but not empty-handed. This time, you bring less gold. You gave so much of it away on the outbound leg that you're now, let's say, lightly liquidated. Not broke, never broke, but you're not quite at distort the global economy levels anymore. And that's actually fine. You've learned something. Gold impresses, but it also distorts. People stare at your coins, not your ideas. So now, you're leaning on reputation, influence, vision, and perhaps a little humility, though not enough to stop your griots from composing a song called The Desert Blinked First. Even your griots have changed. Their poems are less about your wealth, more about your wisdom. They sing of Mecca, of Cairo, of knowledge that floats like mist and settles like truth. One of them is even working on a play. You're unsure how that'll go in the desert, but you encourage it anyway. Your scholars debate constantly. Arabic dialects versus West African phonetics, proper manuscript preservation techniques, whether mosques should have domes or just big, open skies. You love it. You wander from campfire to campfire, listening to arguments about law, science, astronomy, and whether dates are better dried or soaked in goat milk. Spoiler, your team goat milk. You even begin practicing diplomacy mid-desert. At an oasis deep in the Tainsraft, you meet a Berber leader with control over the next well. He's gruff, suspicious, not impressed by your reputation, but he's intrigued by the fact that your jurist quotes his imams, and your astronomer can calculate prayer times by star position. You don't have to bribe him with gold. You impress him with knowledge. That's new. You leave with a handshake, a water refill, and the Berber's oldest son trailing behind your caravan, asking how to say university in Arabic. One fringe moment, your stargazer, perched between two saddlebags and half asleep, swears he saw a burning wheel roll across the sky. He claims it's a sign of divine approval. Your jurist insists it was just a meteor. The camel under them both is unmoved. You decide to count it as both. Your team begins drafting plans for your return to Niani. The architect makes sketches in the sand. The poet writes verses that double as building blueprints. You have nightly councils, under tents, under stars, sometimes under duress when sandstorms sweep through and erase everyone's progress. You keep moving. Your own mind, meanwhile, hums constantly. You're seeing the empire now not just as land, but as infrastructure. You imagine roads between cities lit by lanterns carved with verses. Mosques open not just for prayer, but for debate. Libraries that don't just store books, but copy them, translate them, birth more. And scribes, hundreds of them, recording everything, so no knowledge dies quietly in the dark. Historians still argue whether Mali's golden age would have happened without your pilgrimage. Some say the trade routes would have expanded regardless. Others claim your Hajj was the spark that set fire to the scrolls. But no one denies this. You came back changed, and with you came the blueprint of a better world. You recrossed the Niger River. The water looks less like a barrier now, and more like a welcome mat. Children along the banks cheer when they see your returning banners. The drums start again, slower this time, but deeper. Your people had thought you might never return, that the desert swallowed you like it did others. Instead, they see you crest the horizon with a new rhythm, a trimmed caravan, and a scholar riding beside you instead of a spear-bearer. One village chief bows so deeply he nearly falls into his cooking fire. You help him up. Next time, you say, "I'll bring chairs." You're almost home, and behind you, a river of ideas flows toward Mali. The final leg of your journey winds through lands that should feel familiar, villages where people speak your tongue, hills you once rode across as a boy. But now, everything looks slightly unfamiliar. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You no longer see Niani as just a seat of power. You see it as a blank canvas. You imagine what could be. A city of learning, lit by lanterns, buzzing with ideas, filled with students reciting poetry under mango trees. It's no longer just a capital. It's a future. But first, you have to land this hole. I left for a year with 60,000 people and came back with 40,000 and a bunch of poets situation. You make your entrance into Niani with controlled elegance. No over-the-top theatrics this time. There's no blizzard of gold dust, no live ostriches wearing crowns. Just you, riding slowly through the gates, dressed in white, your face sun-darkened, your beard longer, and your eyes set on something much larger than a throne. Your people erupt anyway. They sing, they cry, they throw down fabric, so your horse doesn't touch the dirt. One elder faints from sheer relief. Children climb trees for a better view. Someone fires a ceremonial arrow into the sky. It comes down and sticks in a water pot. Everyone cheers. Why? You're not sure. Doesn't matter. There's a formal celebration, feasting, drumming, a bit of dancing, some of it highly questionable in rhythm. But as night falls, you retreat quietly. Not because you're tired, you are, but because you already have your next move in mind. You call a meeting of your advisors, your scholars, and a few local elders. The room is hot, full of questions. They ask how the Hajj was. You answer with a rolled-out scroll, the first draft of what will become your blueprint for Mali's transformation. You begin. We will build a university. Not just a school. Not just a mosque with some clever lectures. A real center of learning. You describe what you saw in Mecca and Cairo. Madrasas with domes, reading halls where students debate until sunrise, scribes copying books so fast the ink never dries. You want that here. In Timbuktu, in Gao, in Jen, wherever minds gather. Some raise eyebrows. Why Timbuktu? One elder asks. It's mostly sand and goats. You smile. Sand can be shaped. Goats can listen. You appoint your Cairo architect to oversee the design. He's already sketching domes in the dirt with a stick and muttering about clay ratios. You assign land. You assign gold. You assign goats, because apparently that's now a unit of measurement for construction effort. The jurist you brought back lays out a curriculum of Islamic law, language, ethics, and astronomy. One of your scholars requests permission to found a school of calligraphy. Another suggests a translation bureau, so that Arabic, Sonic, Mande, and even Fulani scholars can learn from one another. Then comes the real gold, the books. You unload crate after crate of manuscripts, legal texts, philosophical treatises, medical diagrams, star charts, rare Quranic commentaries, poems so old the ink has faded into myth. The scribes gasp like children unwrapping gifts. Within days, copying begins. Within weeks, book markets emerge. Within months, Timbuktu becomes a name scholars whisper across continents. Historians still argue whether you founded Sankore University personally or merely funded its explosive growth. But everyone agrees, Mali became a light in West Africa because you brought the spark. You also reformed governance. Inspired by the discipline you observed in Islamic courts abroad, you revamp your judiciary. Judges are now trained, literate, and appointed not by bloodline, but by knowledge. This causes a minor scandal among the aristocrats, especially your cousin Idrissa, who once tried to resolve a land dispute with a gourd and a song. You gently retire him. You issue new coinage, lighter, marked with Quranic verses, stamped with a star. Your mint begins operating with frightening efficiency. You might have overcorrected for the Cairo inflation disaster, but hey, at least bread prices are stable now. A fringe detail. You also found a department, yes, a department, for camel training. After losing nearly a third of your caravan animals to laziness, wanderlust, or mid-desert existential crises. You decide it's time to professionalize camel logistics. One handler insists on naming them all after historical philosophers. You don't argue. At least he cares. Your people notice the shift. Niani is louder, smarter, more ambitious. Students arrive from all corners of the empire. Foreign scholars begin showing up, clutching dusty scrolls and bowing awkwardly at the palace gate. Your griots start telling stories not of battles, but of debates, like the time two students argued about lunar calendars for 6 hours until they were fed and forcibly separated. Your architect presents you with a model for a new mosque. It's wide and open, with high towers for the call to prayer and shaded walkways where people can read and speak. It will last for centuries, he says. You ask if it can include a small library. He laughs. It is a library. You stand on your palace roof one evening, watching as builders lay the first bricks. In the distance, children are reciting Quranic verses under the trees. Beyond them, a caravan pulls in, books strapped to the sides, minds ready to open. This is your empire now. Gold may have made you famous, but knowledge will make you eternal. You're no longer just a king. You're an architect of futures. And now that the foundations of your grand vision are being laid, brick by brick, scroll by scroll, it's time to do something even harder than crossing the Sahara or not laughing when a camel sneezes on a jurist. You have to govern differently. You sit in council chambers that once echoed with war plans and trade deals, and now they fill with questions like, what are the long-term effects of consolidating schools under mosque-based leadership? How do we support both Arabic instruction and native Mande literacy? Should scholars be paid in coin, food, or goats? You allow the goat payments. Regret it later. Governance used to be a matter of edicts and punishments. Now it feels like chess, with scholars, merchants, spiritual leaders, and distant governors all making moves at once. It's not flashy. It's not something the griots sing about. But it's vital. You create a council of scholars, your circle of the learned, people who don't answer to gold or lineage but to ideas. You give them seats, actual carved seats. That's how seriously you take this. This council debates everything: road planning, market ethics, tax fairness, and yes, whether or not one of your imported scholars is actually just a very convincing con man with a fake beard. They end up letting him stay. He's shockingly good at teaching math. One particularly heated debate concerns inheritance law. Your jurist argues for stricter Quranic codes, but a griot counters that traditional Malian clan structures must be preserved. For hours, the room trembles with argument. Finally, you offer a compromise: dual systems, both respected, both written down. One for the court, one for the people. Historians will hate this. Someone mutters. You nod. That means we're doing it right. And speaking of writing things down, you now insist on record keeping. Your scribes are everywhere, scratching out legal contracts, royal decrees, and trade agreements in ledgers that multiply like desert lizards. You install them in markets, in schools, in mosques. You make the spoken word permanent. Even your own speeches now get recorded. You find out later one scribe was editing your grammar mid-transcript. You reward him with a promotion. Quietly delete the speech. Then there's trade. The old salt for gold system still runs strong, but now you're plugging your empire into global currents like an early adapter of intellectual globalization. Timbuktu becomes a crossroads not just for caravans, but for curricula. You ink new agreements with merchants who've never even heard of Mali before. Your port on the Senegal River starts seeing ships from Andalusia. You invite Jewish merchants to return, offering protection and tax breaks. One brings you a pair of reading spectacles. You don't need them, but you wear them to look wise during court sessions. And then there's art, because what good is knowledge without beauty? You commission calligraphers to create illuminated manuscripts. You build a center for music preservation, songs, rhythms, scales from across West Africa transcribed into elegant scrolls. You even establish a small theater, yes, a theater, for dramatized storytelling based on historical events. The premiere features a reenactment of your Meccan pilgrimage. The camel actors are deeply uncooperative. It's a hit. There's even a debate about architectural decoration. Some scholars want everything austere and geometric. Others argue for color and sculpture. You compromise again, simple on the outside, stunning within, like the best kind of wisdom. But not everyone is thrilled. Some nobles resent your shift towards scholarship and learning. They miss the days when wealth alone meant power. One of them complains that your scholars use too many big words. You assign him to work in the scriptorium. He accidentally invents an alphabet sorting system. You promote him. In time, your policies begin to spread. Local governors copy your model. Regional chiefs send their sons to Timbuktu to be educated. Even rival kingdoms take notice. Envoys arrive from Bornu, from Songhai, from distant Morocco, asking how you trained your judges, built your libraries, mapped your markets. You respond with open palms. Send your brightest. Let them learn with us. Because now you're no longer guarding your knowledge. You're exporting it. A fringe moment. Your astronomer, yes, the hammock guy, is mapping lunar calendars onto market schedules. He insists commerce flows better under certain constellations. One governor calls it nonsense, then sees a 14% rise in millet sales during his star-proof cycle. You quietly authorize the experiment empire-wide. Call it astroeconomics. By now, your reputation has evolved. You're still remembered as the man with the golden caravan. But more and more, you're talked about as Musa, the builder of minds. You start receiving gifts not of gold, but books, manuscripts, inventions. One inventor sends you a mechanical sundial shaped like a bird that chirps at noon. It works once, then explodes. You give him a medal anyway. In your quiet moments, you wander through the halls of the mosque you helped fund. It smells of ink and clay. Students murmur verses. One recites a poem about how the mind is a flame that feeds on doubt. You smile. Your vision is no longer a dream. It walks. It breathes. It learns. You've created an empire of gold. Now, you're building one of light. You wake earlier these days. Not because you have to. Not because there's war, or crisis, or even anything urgent. But because just before dawn, when the air is cool and still, your city hums in silence. A different kind of noise. A peaceful buzz made of sleeping breath, distant prayers, and the occasional rooster deeply confused about timing. You like to sit at your window with a cup of that strange spiced coffee your Yemeni scholars introduced to the palace. It's bitter. Wakes you up like a slap from a librarian. From here, you watch your empire breathe. The courtyards of the mosque flicker with early lanterns as scribes prepare their ink. In the distance, you can see the roof of the scriptorium, which you had built taller than regulation just to annoy your architect. The man has never forgiven you, but he did later invent rain-catching gutters because of it, so you're calling it even. Your mornings are filled with students now, not literal children, though some do sit cross-legged in the courtyards mouthing verses, but young advisors, thinkers, and future governors. You make them shadow your court. You quiz them on trade policy and Quranic law. One even dares to argue with you about inheritance tax. You nearly cry. From pride. Mostly. But change is never as smooth as your gold coin. Even as Mali flourishes, cracks whisper at the edges. For one, your wealth, though still immense, is no longer infinite. The Cairo inflation fiasco, still echoing. The cost of building libraries, importing books, funding scholarships, paying scribes who insist on being able to eat. It adds up. You begin tightening the royal treasury. Slightly. Quietly. No one wants a budget scroll during morning prayers. You start taxing foreign traders a bit more, especially the smug ones with silk hats and attitudes. You also implement land grants instead of gold payments for some court jobs. Historians still argue whether this policy stabilized the economy or just made nobles cranky. Probably both. Then there are the scholars. Oh, the scholars. They're brilliant, passionate, tireless, and very bad at agreeing. One group insists the library needs a fireproof vault. Another insists on building a rooftop observatory. Both want the same courtyard. Your solution: build the observatory over the vault. It works, except for the astronomer, who drops inkpots from the roof onto people he disagrees with. You issue a decree banning ink-based aerial diplomacy. Some tensions also rise between tradition and reform. Your new legal system, while admired, doesn't always blend smoothly with older clan customs. Elders complain their authority is eroding. Some call your scholars book warriors. A few rural districts begin grumbling that Timbuktu is becoming too foreign, too Arabiized, too full of ideas, and not enough rain. So you do what you've learned to do best. You listen. You host regional forums, bring in village leaders, hold dialogues under tamarind trees. You allow religious leaders from different Islamic schools to give sermons in turn. Even the grumpy one who insists your calligraphers are too flashy. He quotes a hadith and then knocks over an inkstand for emphasis. Still, you let him speak. And then you fund the repairs. You also institute new roles, cultural scribes, whose job is to preserve oral traditions in writing. Griots partner with scholars. One griot, suspicious at first, ends up co-authoring a history of your dynasty with a poet from Kerwa. It's titled The Gold That Walked. You don't mind the flair. At this point, word of Mali's intellectual glow has spread far beyond its borders. You receive letters from Baghdad, Fez, even a curious inquiry from a Venetian trader named Marco something. You send back a polite scroll, a gift of salt slabs, and a single sentence. You are welcome to visit, but bring your own ink. Your schools are full. Your cities are humming. Your postal system, yes, you invent one, now delivers scrolls faster than any camel has a right to move. It's all working. But you know history doesn't sleep. You've read enough scrolls to know how easily a golden age can flicker out. 1 weak successor, one broken dam, one bad harvest, or arrogant warlord, or plague sneeze in a crowded port. So you begin a quieter project. You build archives, not just libraries, but secure vaults beneath your palace. You task a secret team, scholars, scribes, and one suspiciously well-fed cat, to preserve your empire's knowledge. You tell them, one day, even the brightest city dims, but when someone digs, they should find light. You also draft your own memoirs. Sort of. It's a long, poetic reflection. You call it The Dust Remembers. It begins not with your birth, but with your arrival in Mecca. You write about the heat, the call to prayer echoing off stone, the feeling of being one drop in a river of millions. You end the first draft with a line. I went to find God and found a library. No one likes that line but you. You keep it anyway. In the evenings, when the work is done and your scepter is more paperweight than power symbol, you return to your roof. The stars above Timbuktu burn bright, ancient, uncaring. But somewhere out there, someone is reading your scrolls. And that's enough. Sometimes, late at night, you walk the streets of Niani in disguise. A simple robe, a borrowed walking stick, and a slight limp to sell the illusion. Not because you enjoy deception, but because kings rarely hear honesty when they enter with drums. So you drift through the markets. Listen, observe. You hear things. A butcher arguing with a scholar over whether lunar phases affect meat prices. A child reciting legal codes like bedtime rhymes. A woman proudly announcing her daughter was accepted into the mosque school, the one with the roof that leaks when it's too humble to rain. You smile. That leaky roof is your fault. You promised to fix it. You still haven't. It's on a scroll somewhere. The city is alive. Not just buzzing with trade, though it is, but with thought. Conversations spill out of tea houses. Men and women quote Quranic verses alongside astronomy facts. Markets sell scrolls next to spices. Children write poetry in the dust with their toes. You've never seen so many questions, or such pride in asking them. And yet, you also hear other things. Whispers of merchants hoarding gold, governors exploiting their power under the cover of reform. Jealous nobles who believe Timbuktu is draining attention from Niani. One man grumbles that these new scholars talk too fast and read too much. You can't help but chuckle. That used to be you. Your reforms have lifted minds, but stirred egos. So, back at the palace, you do what you become best at. You balance. You summon your governors, reaffirm their autonomy, while sliding into conversation a new rotation system for mosque-appointed scribes to audit their regions. You call it a simple pilgrimage of learning. You don't call it oversight. They nod anyway. You increase stipends for elders in rural districts. You establish a rotating forum of village representatives, a place where those outside Timbuktu and Niani can voice concerns, air grievances, suggest policies. At the first one, a farmer proposes mandatory donkey rest days. Another suggests camel toll roads. You write both down. Half seriously. You also quietly invest in military infrastructure. Not swords and spears, though you don't forget those, but in training, discipline, language classes for soldiers, so they can communicate across ethnic lines. An empire without defense is an invitation, but an empire with an educated army? That's a fortress with ears. They're also your dreams. They've changed. You used to dream of palaces, of riding through Cairo streets as poets flung gold at rooftops. Now you dream of scrolls, of ink that doesn't smudge, of students decades from now reading texts written today and murmuring. You tried. You dream of legacy, which is why you now prepare for something you once feared. Succession. You're not old. Not quite. But you're not the sunburned pilgrim anymore either. You move slower. Climb stairs carefully. You've begun sleeping with a folded manuscript beneath your pillow. Not for comfort, but for company. So you call in your sons, and your daughters, and your nephews, and one niece who reads 3 languages and frightens most of the palace staff with her grammar corrections. You gather them not for war stories, not for wealth distribution, but for a lecture. Your topic. Power is not a mountain. They shift uncomfortably. You go on anyway. A mountain does not move. It waits to be climbed. But power must move. Like a river. Like breath. Like thought. You hand each of them a scroll, a blank one. Write what kind of leader you would be. You say. Then rewrite it. And again. You must never stop revising. You don't name a successor yet. Not openly. But you've begun preparing the next ruler to be more than a figurehead. You want them to think, to read, to understand that ruling is not about glory, but stewardship. Historians still debate which of your heirs you favored. Some say it was your second son, the cautious one who loved old stories. Others claim it was your daughter, the one who built her own reading room and declared her mango tree a university annex. The truth is, you love them all. But you love Molly more. In your private garden, where the citron trees curve like old question marks, you begin constructing a quiet legacy. You plant 1 tree for each mosque built during your reign. You walk among them sometimes, touching the bark, whispering prayers. One gardener swears he saw you talking to the trees once. You don't deny it. You also begin collecting your favorite manuscripts, copies of the Quran, works of law, songs, star maps, and 1 scroll simply titled, How Not to Misuse a Camel. You store them in a carved wooden chest lined with sheepskin and scented with frankincense. Someday, you'll give this to your heir. And someday, long after you're gone, a scholar will open it and see a handwritten note inside. If you found this, keep going. The empire was never finished. It never should be. Because the truth is, empires built on conquest end. Empires built on ideas, those echo, and yours is still whispering. You always knew the world would forget your exact face. That's how history works. It sandpapers away the features, the habits, the quirks. Maybe someday, a griot will misremember which hand you wrote with. Maybe a scholar will debate whether your beard was full or patchy. They'll write essays about your reign without ever knowing how much you hated sandals. But that's fine. Because while your face may fade, your shadow is growing longer. Your reforms have taken root. Timbuktu is no longer an idea whispered between caravan stops. It's a reality. A pulsing intellectual engine where students memorize Arabic grammar one day and debate planetary motion the next. Where griots teach historians how to rhyme. Where libraries grow like orchards. The Sankor Mosque, in particular, has become the brain of the empire. Its courtyards are full even before the call to prayer. You once wandered in unannounced and heard a child explain hadith using metaphors about rice farming. You gave him a scholarship. Then you asked him to repeat it more slowly. You're still not sure you fully understood. You visit Sankor often now. Not with ceremony, not with retinues, but with a quiet reverence. You like to sit in the back, listen to the hum of voices, feel the cool stone beneath your palms. There's always someone learning something, and that means the empire is alive. But with growth comes complexity. Your schools now host students from distant lands, Yemen, Egypt, even Andalusia. With them come accents, questions, customs. Some scholars argue this is diluting true Malian scholarship. Others claim it's the beginning of a new intellectual golden age. You call for a public debate. Hundreds gather. Two professors argue fiercely, one quoting Quranic law, the other referencing a parable involving 3 cats and a water jug. The debate lasts 4 hours, ends in a draw. The students cheer. You quietly commission a mosaic commemorating the event. It features one very confused-looking cat. Meanwhile, new roads are being laid. Literally, cobblestone paths now link your major cities, Timbuktu, Gaojian, and Niani, forming what your architect insists on calling the knowledge spine. You allow it, mostly because he seems very proud. Postal riders gallop across them daily, carrying scrolls instead of spears. These couriers, many of them former scribes, wear satchels lined with waxed leather to protect manuscripts from rain, sweat, and the occasional curious goat. Your empire hums with information. One fringe innovation. A scholar invents a sandproof case for scrolls. He demonstrates it by burying a copy of the Quran in the courtyard for a week. It survives. He is celebrated. Someone writes a song called The Scroll That Didn't Die. You hear it played on a flute. It's surprisingly catchy. You begin receiving requests from other rulers. The Sultan of Cairo sends for your legal opinions. The Caliph of Baghdad, who still technically exists, even if mostly in theory, sends a beautifully calligraphed letter thanking you for reviving the light of the West. You frame it. Then you spot 3 grammatical errors. You forgive them. Other monarchs begin copying your model. One even sends a group of scholars to Mali for training. You meet them personally. They ask about your court's educational policies. You give them a tour of your archives. One weeps. You also establish something you never thought you would, a national reading day. Once a year, the entire empire pauses. Markets close. Classes gather in courtyards. Storytellers are invited into mosques. Parents read to children. Imams read to farmers. Griots recite legal codes in verse. You personally read selections from your own journals. You skip the embarrassing bits. It becomes the most beloved holiday of the year. Even your soldiers participate. One unit reads aloud from a manual on camel morale and maintenance. The camels seem unimpressed, but not everything is bound in scrolls and syllables. Your people still need food, water, stability, so you double down on irrigation efforts. Wells are dug near new settlements. Farming collectives are taught how to rotate crops using techniques shared by Andalusian visitors. You send agricultural scholars into the countryside with not scrolls, but shovels. A lesser king might have resented this shift, from gold and glory to mud and millet. But you don't, because building an empire of thought requires soil too. And then, one afternoon, sitting beneath a fig tree in your palace courtyard, you hear a child ask a teacher, "Who was Musa again?" The teacher smiles. He walked across the desert with gold, but he came back with books. You don't interrupt. You just lean back. Let the sun warm your knees. That version will do. One morning, as the dry season begins to loosen its grip, a quiet breeze carries the scent of blooming acacia through your window. You inhale deeply. It's the same smell you remember from your boyhood, the time before crowns, before scrolls, before all of this. You smile, then cough, because acacia pollen still isn't your friend. Your body reminds you now of things your mind tries to ignore. Knees that creak like camel carts. Vision that's not as sharp as it once was. You begin walking with a cane. Not for need, you claim, but for style. You have it carved from baobab wood, etched with verses of your favorite surah. When the court asks what it means, you tell them, "It means I still plan to outlive my enemies." They laugh. You almost believe it, but you're not sad. Because you know now that legacy isn't about lasting, it's about layering. Every morning, you meet with your advisors, not because you must, but because the habit comforts you. They report on irrigation projects, legal cases, new school petitions, even a proposed Timbuktu street named the Avenue of the Whispering Griots. You approve it instantly. You want the empire to remember its storytellers. You've long since stepped back from micromanaging. Mali no longer needs your hand on every scroll. You've trained leaders, thinkers, builders. Your greatest achievement might be how easily the machine runs now without you cranking it. You still write, though. Privately. Your journals are quieter these days. Reflections on memory, impermanence. The way ideas spread like candlelight across generations. You pen a story about a grain of gold dropped in the desert that grows into a tree of books. A metaphor, obviously. Mostly. You also begin preparing your will. Not the gold part. That's long settled. Your children will inherit enough wealth to start a small kingdom each, or buy all the camels in North Africa, which is a very real risk. You include a stern note. No camel monopolies. What matters to you more is the intellectual inheritance. You leave detailed instructions for the care of your libraries. You appoint a steward to the archives, an aging scholar who once debated you for 3 hours over whether writing amen at the end of a poem is tacky. You trust him deeply. You make provisions for your lesser-known projects, too. The paper mill near Gao, the desert seed bank, the whispernet of griots trained to record oral stories with strange symbols you invented late one night. You want them preserved, not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. You also request your body not be buried in splendor. You write, "Let them find me in dust, not gold. Let the light I leave speak louder than the crown I wore." But you do allow one exception, a small carved quote placed above your final resting place. You choose it from a poem written by a young scholar from Jen, someone who never met you, but dreamed of your caravan long before she knew your name. It reads, "He walked across the sand and left behind a garden." Historians still argue what it means. That's exactly why you like it. Your final days are calm. Not because you've stopped dreaming, but because you've finally realized you don't have to do it all yourself. You've given your people tools. Not just hammers and bricks, but questions and principles. One day, your astronomer visits. He's older now, too. Less hammock, more wisdom. You ask if he still maps the stars. He nods. But now, I chart the stories of scholars. I call them constellations of the mind. You smile. Then put me somewhere in there. Small star. Slightly sarcastic. He promises. Your last ride through Timbuktu is quiet. No fanfare. Just you and a few guards, passing through streets you helped build, past towers you dreamed into stone. Children wave. Vendors nod. A student drops a scroll. You help her pick it up. You don't need to say goodbye. The Empire already knows. The day your body leaves Niani, it is still dark. No trumpet wakes the city. No parade. No scrolls flutter in the wind. Just the soft shuffle of feet as a small procession winds through the streets. Your coffin, simple and cedar-sweet, rests on the shoulders of those who once debated law beside you. The old architect leads, holding a lantern. He walks slowly now. Knees like yours. They say kings are buried in gold. You insisted on something quieter. You are laid to rest in a tomb near the river, a modest domed chamber, encircled by tamarind trees and carved stone. The final verse of the Quran is inscribed above the doorway, and below that, the line you chose. He walked across the sand and left behind a garden. The garden is real. You planted it decades ago. Saplings from distant lands. Fruit trees. Shade trees. One gnarled old acacia you grew from a seed, carried back from Mecca. It still blooms. A child plays there now, reading aloud from a scroll, his voice echoing under the trees. He doesn't know whose tomb lies nearby. Not yet. He will. Timbuktu continues without you. In Sankor, the students argue loudly under the same leaky roof. The scroll copyists now number in the hundreds. One of them invents a quicker way to press ink onto parchment, using weighted bone. Another insists on color-coding religious texts for clarity. Griots still debate whether red should be for law or love. Your postal riders carry news between cities like veins pumping breath through a body. One scroll details a new well dug in Jen, Another maps the rising of new schools in the South. One even contains a recipe for spicy yam stew from a teacher who insists culinary literacy is part of nation building. Governors still meet in council, still quote your maxims, often incorrectly, but with passion. One governor begins every meeting with your favorite phrase. No idea is so sacred it can't be asked twice. That one was yours. You said it after being bested by a 9-year-old girl in a market debate over taxation. You'd be proud, or at least pretending not to be. Even abroad, your name lingers like perfume on silk. Merchants in Alexandria still tell stories of the king who flooded Cairo with gold. They don't always get the details right. Sometimes you rode a white elephant. Sometimes you rained sapphires from your turban. But the myth doesn't bother you, because the truth, quiet, ink-stained, and full of effort, is alive. It breathes in the thousands of manuscripts tucked into earthen libraries across Mali, in the mosque domes kissed by sandstorms and lit by prayer, in the villages where grandmothers recite poems you wrote, not knowing your name, but feeling your rhythm. Historians still argue. Some say your pilgrimage was vanity, that you gave away too much, spent too freely. Let scholars distract from politics. Others claim you lifted a continent with ideas sharper than spears and longer lasting than coins, that you turned an empire of land into an empire of light. You, of course, are no longer around to correct them. But maybe, if you're lucky, someone will read your scrolls late one night and smile. Maybe a tired student in a windswept corner of Sankor will whisper, "This Musa, he really tried." And maybe that's enough, because you always believed empires shouldn't end in silence. They should end in echoes. And now, as your journey fades behind us, like caravan footprints vanishing into sand, we drift softly into stillness. The desert sleeps again. The markets fall quiet. The golden domes of Timbuktu gleam faintly beneath a blanket of stars, their glow like memory, soft and stubborn. Somewhere a camel sighs. A lantern swings gently from a scholar's hand as he closes the door to a library filled with stories you helped build. It's peaceful now. The drums have stopped, but the rhythm lingers in the air, like a pulse that continues long after the last note. A rhythm made of learning, of laughter, of gentle arguments beneath fig trees, and whispered prayers scrawled in ink. You don't need to walk the desert anymore. Your footprints are in every page, every question asked, every voice raised in thoughtful joy. So as your eyes grow heavy, just imagine the quiet hum of those distant libraries, the soft turning of pages, the hush of candlelight breathing its golden warmth over parchment. Let yourself drift among the scrolls, safe between lines of poetry and law, wrapped in the steady arms of memory. Let the stars above Mali cradle you. Let the river flow beside you, and let the garden grow. Good night, traveler.